This episode is brought to you by SS&C Mineralware. Are you managing mineral assets and feeling overwhelmed? Unsure if you're getting paid what you're owed? SS&C Mineralware is here to simplify the management of your minerals, royalties, and non-operated working interests. Mineralware's out-of-the-box features give you the tools you need to visualize and keep track of all of your assets in one place. Mineralware lets you know in seconds where your interests are, what's active, what acreage is open for lease, and if you're getting paid what you're owed. With Mineralware, you can even automate your revenue and JIB processing and eliminate tedious manual data entry, allowing you to focus on more pressing issues. Thousands of mineral owners rely on Mineralware to keep their mineral management simple, automatic, and all in one place. Take control of your mineral assets today with SS&C Mineralware. To see a demo, you can visit their website at www.mineralware.com. That's mineralware.com.
Are you ready to make the most of your oil and gas mineral rights? Welcome to the Mineral Rights Podcast. Get the knowledge and resources you need to manage your minerals and royalties. Here is your host, Matt Sands.
Hello and welcome to the Mineral Rights Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Sands, and I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Williams, and we're here to help you make the most of your minerals and royalties. In this episode, we're going to cover the latest mineral rights and oil and gas news for July of 2026. And we had to replace a couple articles because things are changing so fast from day to day as far as price of oil and what's going on geopolitically. We were kind of joking beforehand about the fact that it's going to change, tomorrow, probably by the time we record this, maybe something different, but this is the latest news as it relates to that.
The war and the volatility in oil is really taking over most of the news cycle, though there's some other interesting things going on, sneaking around it.
It's definitely been an interesting news cycle, some interesting developments across multiple states, so we'll cover that. But of course, what's on everybody's mind is the oil price and what's going to happen next. So Justin, you want to cover this first article here?
Oil prices rise as the U.S. and Iran reach a deal to halt attacks. U.S. oil is above $70 per barrel after an agreement between the U.S. and Iran to halt recent hostilities in the Middle East. The talks aimed at ending the conflict between the U.S. and Iran, and those have been paused as of right now, Matt. Military tensions around the Strait of Hormuz continue, and it unsettles energy markets. So oil prices rose on Monday following an agreement, and then the WTI price rose 1.7% to $70.38 a barrel. The West Texas Intermediate contract settled below 70 on Friday for the first time since February 27th, the day before the start of the Iran war. So Matt, that's kind of been the name of the game, and it's going up and down, which operators really don't want to do anything in that climate.
Obviously they want to have a level of comfort that whatever price that their environment that they're investing in is going to lead to a positive outcome in terms of a, positive return on investment. And when prices are swinging wildly, many companies will just sit on the sidelines waiting to see where it settles out. I was having a conversation last week with a client about the current price. They're looking to sell some interest, and they were, we were contemplating, is this a good environment to be selling? And I admitted to them that I was surprised that oil fell as low as it did after the initial agreement between the U.S. and Iran and the partial reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Like we've talked about over the past several months on this show, that there's a lot of pent-up demand, a lot of that oil that has been taken off the market when we're at a point where, supply and demand, I felt like we were in an oversupply situation for sure, but I didn't feel like it was that big of an oil oversupply situation. So I felt like once the Strait reopened, when we were up about $100 a barrel, I figured, we would fall down to maybe $80 a barrel, given where we were before the conflict. And that's not the case. It dropped down to $70 a barrel. And so I don't know if there's manipulation going on, or I think probably what it means is the price of oil, if this conflict hadn't happened, would probably be closer to $50 a barrel. There was a lot of downward pressure on prices at the beginning of the year before the war broke out. And so maybe it is that $70 represents the balance, the true market price, the balance between supply and demand. And in which case, we would be in a bear market for oil had that thing not happened. So pretty interesting when you think about $70 a barrel. And we're saying, wow, that seems low given all the things that have happened and the damage, permanent damage that happened on some of those facilities that have to be rebuilt. And it's going to be a considerable amount of time before they're back online. But despite that, prices are still around $70 a barrel. So I think if things do smooth out between the U.S. and Iran, despite the latest volley of attacks over the weekend in early July of 2026 or late June of 2026, when that happened, then I think prices will fall back down below $70. And so it's going to be, seems like maybe between 60 and 70 is where things will settle out, which is, I think still in an okay position for oil and gas companies to be continuing to drill, kind of at the current pace. I think what we've seen and what other articles that I've read are supporting the fact that companies are paying down debt right now instead of drilling additional wells. So unfortunately, I don't think we are seeing the sustained increased prices, and despite the additional cash flow that has been generated over the first quarter and into the second quarter of 2026, companies are using that to sort of stand up their balance sheets in terms of paying down debt, buying back stock, et cetera. And so that is what we're seeing from a public company standpoint now. Again, for companies that are privately owned, it could be that they're going to drill a little bit more than they would have otherwise. But we'll talk a little bit more when we get to the rig count as far as what we're seeing in the data. But kind of an interesting developments in price of oil. Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. And it seems to be that there's not a knee-jerk reaction. They're trying to look at what's going to happen whenever this comes back into balance. So only time will tell what actually happens. Our next one, Matt. So Trump accuses oil companies of gouging drivers and orders Department of Justice to investigate. So the article here says that President Donald Trump broke into the U.S. oil sector on Wednesday, announcing oil majors of keeping gasoline prices high and prolonging the pain at the pump as he sought to bring his 4-month war against Iran to a close. So, Matt, I think there's always a disconnect between the price of oil and then what happens at the pump. And we've had a lot of people speaking up to talk about this and their stance on it, from the American Petroleum Institute to the American Automobile Association. So long story short, it sounds like we're likely to see the prices come down if the volatility levels out. But, nobody really knows what to do when we have so much volatility right now.
Yeah, this is funny because, every president does this, right? They say, well, prices are low. I'm doing everything I can. And it's the big bad, big oil that is, they're keeping the prices high and they're price gouging. And that is, I'm not going to use colorful language here, but I think it is silly to say that. Frankly, the way that the market works is it takes a period of time for prices to trickle down through the refineries, right? So what happens is refiners have to buy enough oil to have a supply to run the refinery continuously. Those do not like to shut off. They can't shut them off and turn them back on easily. So they have, I don't know the number of weeks or months or days that they have in inventory, but typically, it's at least, I would say, a few days worth of inventory, and they're continually buying feedstock, right? Buying crude oil. And so when they have to buy prices, when the prices were closer to $80 a barrel, the next day that it drops to $70 a barrel because all of a sudden there's an agreement in Iran, well, the price of oil at the pump isn't going to drop the next day. It's going to take probably days or weeks to trickle through the system to where prices will come down commensurate with what the oil price is. And the average U.S. gasoline price at $3.93 per gallon, which is down from $4.51 a gallon a month ago. So it seems like we're on the, we're headed in that direction. They're not, I think the president would have a case if the price at the pump was still $4.50 now, given the prices have fallen to around $70 a barrel. But the fact that gas prices are 70 cents higher than this time last year is due to the volatility, like Justin said, and the higher prices that we've just had weeks ago, that we've had prices that are higher than $70 a barrel. And it's this low price that we're seeing right now is a recent event. It's not, it's going to take some time for that to trickle through to the prices at the pump. Now, I will say we're headed in the right direction. And, I think that's going to continue to happen as long as prices continue to stay where they're at, or, below $70 a barrel, then we'll see prices go back to where they were probably last year during the summertime. You got to keep in mind, too, we are in the summer driving season. So this is the peak demand period for gasoline and diesel. So as people are taking road trips and there's more travel and things like that, the prices reflect that. And so that increased demand means that there's slightly higher oil prices during the summer months, not to take into account any sort of local regulatory requirements like California that may have some special blends they need to reduce emissions during the summer, things like that. I think that it's funny that the Democrats are saying, yes, I have a windfall profit, excess profit bill you could support, in response to Trump's post. Now, I think they're not going to obviously do that. But, he's got to come out publicly so that people, if they believe that at face value, say, okay, well, he's doing everything he can. He's attacking big oil. He's on our side. But frankly, I think that is a misdirected social media post, but not a big surprise.
No, I think he's trying to apply pressure to make it look better. We've seen this before. All right, Matt. So our next one here, we had discussed this and kind of talked about it on a high level with the big, beautiful bill and the changes that it made within policy. But on June 22nd, I believe it was, there was a release from the Interior Department, and it's about the oil and gas leasing and waste prevention rules and the changes that they're making. And this gets far more into exactly what it is they're going to do. The biggest leasing change is the proposed rollback of statewide bonding requirement from $500,000 back to $25,000, which, Matt, that's a huge change. And we discussed whenever this passed that at the time it was too high and there was a lot of opposition from operators and a lot of pushback saying that it would put the small operators out of business. So good to see it lowered, but back to 25,000 is certainly a big change.
Yeah, I think honestly it's gone too far in the other direction. I think when you look at the cost of actually plugging and abandoning a well, in the ideal world, the bonding requirements would cover just that, because that's really all you need to cover if the company were to go out of business or to abandon the site without properly abandoning the well. And in that situation, I could see $75,000 as a standard bonding requirement, and that would make sense to me. And I don't know if that's a per well or if that's a blanket bond requirement. Obviously depends on how many wells that a company operates and drills as to what the liability would be if the state or the federal government needed to step in to plug those wells. So, it's good to see that they're not weaponizing that to prevent development. And so certainly it probably should have come down, but, may have gone down too far. And similarly, the public participation timeframes for some of these rules, around looking at or reviewing the development or proposed development plans or leases, and it reduces that public participation timeframe from 90 days to 10 days, which seems pretty short. So if I were an affected landowner, I'd want to have time to come up with a response particularly if you wanted to do some research or consult with an attorney. 10 days is an awful short period of time to be able to participate in that public comment period. The modernizing the filing fees, that's good. Obviously those need to be streamlined, and to the extent that they're streamlining the overhead that's going into this review process, the fees should probably come down because there's less overhead. So it's interesting to see that, this is not a huge surprise that it's going like in the complete opposite direction of the Biden administration. At some point we need to come up with some sort of a balanced set of regulations that does promote development, but then also it has enough protections in there for people to make public comments and to, make sure we're protecting the environment as we should. So, it's interesting to read that, and not surprising, I suppose, again, like we say, it's each administration is like the polar opposite view from an energy perspective. And, it's good to promote it for sure, promote leasing. And it's good to see leasing occurring again, lease sales on federal lands, because it does have a direct impact on some private property owners. The oil or gas company will need to get a federal lease to be able to develop your minerals as well, because they want to have enough acreage to form a big enough drilling unit to drill, multiple horizontal wells. And if it's in an adjacent section that there's BLM land and they need to get a federal lease, then, promoting that is good for you as a private mineral owner. So interesting to see the change that's happening here.
Yeah, I certainly think it'll streamline things, and there'll be more to come. As you said, Matt, next administration we may see major changes to this again, but hopefully they'll streamline things from a process standpoint, which I think will be better for either way.
Absolutely. And I just realized we forgot to talk about the first article here, and we'll just do a brief one because it's probably not going to affect too many people, but interesting development here in Colorado with the Erie Town Council approving the sale of its mineral rights to SM Energy Company. And what this will allow is SM Energy will allow to conduct its oil and gas operations on the Draco pad, which is right on the border between Weld County and Boulder County. And so it's a multi-well development. And as part of that, they're going to be plugging and abandoning 17 wells, which is good, which means that'll be protecting and, kind of taking care of some of those orphan well issues that we have out there. And then they're also giving the town of Erie a share of revenue from the production, a cash payment. And then they're going to, as a result, the Erie is going to transfer 182 acres, or around 4.9% of the overall Draco drilling area. So that was something that in Colorado here, this was on the fence. It initially failed the vote with the town council, and then they finally approved it. So that's good to see, I think, promoting local development into where the town of Erie is going to benefit from that financially in the future, as well as there's production, but then also they're getting, a little bit of a boost to their local economy. So
interesting to see that originally it had a tied vote. So it was a 3-3 vote. And then it came back and asked for reconsideration, and then had a 4-3 vote. So Matt, it was interesting to see that this got passed, because I think it was questionable in Colorado whether we were going to see that passed or whether it was something that the city wanted to do.
Yeah, it's good to see, because certainly if I'm sure there's some private minerals that are affected by this, and if that hadn't happened, how would that have affected the development of that pad, and it could have delayed or maybe stopped development for those other mineral owners that are affected. So, all right, well, let's talk about the rig count. That's probably what's on everyone's mind. What's this going to mean? These price swings and all that. What's it mean for drilling?
So, man, we're pretty flat. There's not a whole lot of activity going on. We picked up one unit in Colorado as far as onshore, and it looks like kind of a moving around a bit of units, but there's just really not a whole lot of activity, maintaining the status quo.
Yeah, status quo. Interesting thing I noticed was that we are 9 rigs above where we were a year ago. So, it's good to see that we're kind of slightly moving up. So maybe we've reached the bottom, as far as where the drilling activity goes. And hopefully if prices stay at least above $60, maybe we'll stay in this area around the 560 mark. But yeah, like you said, Justin, it seems like it's just pretty much the status quo. Nothing's really changed from this particular time last week. And then if we look back a month ago, we were at 558. So it looks like we're about 5, that would be 5 rigs since a month ago when we last reported on this. So, moving in the right direction. That's up about 1%. So, good to see that, and good to see the stability. At the end of the day, I think that's what most mineral royalty owners want to see is, kind of whatever's going on now, that kind of activity level going on into the future. You can get an idea of when your minerals will get developed. If you're in an area where there's a lot of drilling, and you sort of see the gradual approach towards your property as you're watching it on the Oil and Gas Commission, this sort of steady rig count is going to mean that should continue in the future, and hopefully it gives you an better idea at least of when they might develop your properties. So anyway, yeah, that's what's going on with the rig count right now.
Well, Matt, I think that wraps it up for our July news stories. Again, the news cycle is kind of dominated by what's going on in Iran, but there's some other interesting things going on around the U.S.
Definitely. And we'll keep you posted. I'm sure that as soon as we hit stop here and publish this episode, something will have changed with oil prices in Iran and all of that. But we'll do our best to stay on top of things and keep you updated, and, to stay in touch with the latest developments and, get some insight into these episodes beyond what we just talk about on the air. Make sure you subscribe to my email newsletter. It's free, and you can sign up on my website. So just go to mineralrightspodcast.com and then click the Join Now button at the top of the screen, so you can get some additional insights on these episodes that we publish each week. So thanks again for listening. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much for listening to the Mineral Rights Podcast with your host, Matt Sands. Don't forget to subscribe and share at mineralrightspodcast.com. The Mineral Rights Podcast should not be construed as investment, legal, or tax advice. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy.